good afternoon, and welcome to NCIA's Industry Essentials Educational Webinar Series, our premier digital platform featuring a variety of programs to provide you timely, engaging, and essential education when and where you need it most. My name is Brian Gilbert, the events manager here at NCIA, and I'm very excited to welcome you all to another episode in our NCIA Committee Insights series this afternoon. If you're just joining us, please be aware we'll be conducting Q&A throughout the presentation, so pose any questions to the board by pressing the Q&A button along the bottom toolbar in Zoom. Even if you don't have any questions yourself, stop on into the Q&A area, and if you see another which will contribute to the conversation, give it an upvote to send it to the top of the feed. Now, let's dive into today's important subject matter. As the country continues to grapple with the murder of George Floyd and its aftermath, we have seen reports that numerous cannabis dispensaries in California, Illinois, Oregon, and elsewhere have been victims of targeted property damage and theft. In this webinar, members from both the Risk Management and Insurance Committee, as well as the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee, will provide practical tips for cannabis businesses that have been impacted recently. Thank you to our audience, and shout out to all the NCIA members for joining us this afternoon. And with that, please enjoy today's session being moderated by Jason Horst, Principal at Horst Legal Counsel, as well as the outgoing chair of NCIA's Risk Management and Insurance Committee. You've got the room, Jason. Take it away.
Thanks so much. For the other participants, this is a good time to reactivate your cameras. Wanted to introduce this fabulous panel we have with us today. Chris Crane is the Vice Chair of NCIA's Board of Directors, as well as the founder and managing partner of Forefront Ventures, a national multi-state cannabis operator and retailer focused on mass-produced, low-cost, quality-branded cannabis products, and a mission-branded retail store with an advocacy-rooted consumer experience. Amber Center is the chair of NCIA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Amber is also the co-founder and executive director of Supernova Women, an organization that empowers people of color in the cannabis industry to become self-sufficient shareholders and engages in direct advocacy at the state and local levels to lower the barrier of entry for people affected by the drug war. Amber also serves in her spare time as the CEO of LL Products Breeze Distro, a cannabis-infused products company. Ramon Garcia is the vice chair of NCIA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Ramon serves as the principal of Sanctuary Farms and the distribution manager of Padre Moo, an equity delivery and distribution company in Oakland, California. Ramon's also the co-founder and chief equity officer of the Original Equity Group, social purpose corporation, building pathways to equity in the cannabis ecosystem. Eric Ron is the managing partner of S2S Insurance Solutions. Eric formed S2S in 2014 to focus on the emerging recreational and medical cannabis and hemp industries. Eric has been a leader in the NCIA Risk Management Committee for years and is a proud supporter of the NCIA PAC. Summer Jenkins is a senior product development manager at Canasher Insurance Services, where she develops innovative solutions to address the insurance needs of businesses in the cannabis industry and hemp industries. She has been a leader on the RMIC this year, the Risk Management Insurance Committee. We'll use that acronym a bit, so that's what it is. Summer also serves on the Cannabis Couriers Association, California Cannabis Couriers Association, as the director of diversity and inclusion. She also serves on the California Cannabis Industry Association's Diversity, Inclusion, and Social Equity Committee, which is another committee that I am honored to serve with her on. Ian Stewart is the chair of Wilson Elser's Cannabis and Hemp Law Practice. Ian represents a large range of corporate and insurance clients, including in program management in the areas of product liability, cybersecurity, intellectual property, and professional liability matters. Ian is the immediate past chair of the RMIC, a role that I'll step into in a couple of days, and a member of the International Cannabis Bar Association's Board of Advisors, and has been a real true leader in the effort to normalize cannabis in the legal community. Finally, I'm Jason Horst. I serve on the NCIA's Policy Council and am the chair of the RMIC for just a couple more days here. I am the principal of Horst Legal Counsel, which is a law firm dedicated to serving the litigation and risk management needs of the cannabis community. I also serve as a member of CCI's Diversity, Inclusion, Social Equity Committee and on the board of directors for the International Cannabis Bar Association. So now that we're through that impressive list, wanted to just start out by saying I've moderated some of these panels before, but I think this has been the most challenging one that I've done when it comes to appropriately framing the issues that we're going to be discussing. A number of cannabis companies are in fairly severe distress after the events of the past few weeks. And we've got some terrific experts here to give them some insights into the practical steps they can take to begin the road to business recovery. But obviously that's not the whole story and not really the real story of May and June in 2020. And so if I can be totally unfair and turn to you, Amber, if someone asked you to describe the period since George Floyd's murder, including the impacts on the cannabis community, what would you tell them?
Chaos, lots of civil unrest. Obviously, everyone is experiencing it and seeing it. And I think that people are now starting to see and feel a little bit of the discomfort that Black folks and people of color, brown folks in the United States have been feeling for the past several hundred years. That's like white people are finally starting to, a light bulb's going off. They're feeling some of that discomfort that we've been feeling for a really long time, and they don't like it, but we've been sitting in this place for a very, very, very long time. And I don't know if it was because of the stay in place order and people are finally tuned in and their attention has been kind of focused on what's been happening around them versus being in their own little bubble, that they're finally starting to see what's happening, and people are upset, rightly so, right? So in cannabis, I see the same. I see a lot of these white-led companies and organizations feeling uncomfortable, not sure what to do. So they're kind of starting to do these things that aren't necessarily things that Black and brown folks in cannabis want them to do. So I think this is a very important time for folks to listen and learn and take pointers and direction from Black and brown-led organizations on how they can help us and how we can come to a common place through all this chaos and unrest.
You mentioned businesses, white-owned businesses doing things that are not the direction that you would like to see energy going in. Yes. Can you get a little more specific in what sort of things are you seeing in that regard?
Absolutely. I'm seeing organizations kind of just putting together their own group or like almost like a performative marketing on behalf of Blacks and that's not okay. I'm seeing these organizations making huge donations to groups like the NAACP, to the ACLU that are already very well funded, and honestly, the NAACP has not been a strong force in the Black community or really helping Black folks since the 70s, 60s. I mean, we need direct change. We need folks investing where we see, well, at least in the organizations that are on the ground doing the work, and something where we'll see a return. we need help. And if you are going to help, like, please ask us where we need help so we can direct you in the right place.
That's, I think, really important advice. And one of the things that I'll say in that regard is in the notes for this panel, and also in the folks who are on the panel are resources in that regard. If you have things that you think that you can offer, please reach out to Amber, please reach out to Ramon, to me, and and we can put those services in a list of larger services that are available to people, and if they need them, they'll tap them, and if they don't, they won't. But we will have in the show notes for this panel some of those resources that people can tap, and also reach out to panelists who mentioned them.
Yeah, I would like to mention, really quickly, and I'm sure folks that are tuning in here know, but 75% of Oakland's cannabis businesses were robbed about, what was it, 14 days ago. And a large part of those were Black and brown and social equity operators. Oakland does have the largest amount of Black, brown, and social equity operators in the country. And we were hit very hard. And so that is where, if you're looking to help Black, brown, social equity in cannabis, like, that is here. These are our folks that were very severely impacted. And Ramon and I are actually working together to raise funds to help those businesses and operators that were affected. So that is a very local chain, a local initiative that you can support.
And where should folks look to find where they can donate to to that project that you're working on?
Yeah, so Supernova Women is a 501c3 nonprofit organization. That's what I'm a co-founder, is also the executive director of. And we work directly with Black, brown, and social equity operators. We've been in existence since 2015, supporting these groups and helping them through advocating on their behalf. We advocated very heavily to the city of Oakland to implement, also develop the first social equity program in the country. And yeah, so Supernova Women, and Ramon, he'll speak a bit more also as to what the partnership that we have with his group, OEG, Original Equity Group in San Francisco.
Fantastic. Well, Ramon, you were next to get hit with a question as well. So if you can addend that to your answer, but I wanted to ask first, the nationwide protests that we've seen in recent weeks are obviously about more than one man's death, and rather about a nationwide systemic racism in the way that we police our communities. This has obviously had an impact on our industry, and I wonder whether you can speak to that, as well as giving the information about OEG.
Thank you. I mean, historically, the whole reason why we even have an industry today is because, we were able to prove after decades and decades and generations that Black and brown communities were being policed disproportionately and targeted directly in the war on drugs, right? We have plenty of statistics showing, that Black and brown communities were at least 4 to 5 times more likely to be arrested for, for drug convictions over other communities. And so, like, a big part of the reason why people are able to sell cannabis today and make money off it is because, for these generations of families, we went to jail. We died for it in some cases. And more importantly than that is what people don't understand is like how they used it as a tool in our community. They used it as probable cause to be able to search our cars, and that led to other convictions or disproportional policing. And so like it was this plant and this product was used as a tool to destroy our communities. And the fact that we were able to fight for so long and show is one of the big reasons why big organizations were able to use it as a political tool to get this decriminalized supposedly and legalized. But we still see the impacts. We still see Black and brown people getting arrested for minor marijuana convictions, even right now as this is legal. And so historically, why you feel the compassion and the passion in our community, and really more than that, why you hear us being fed up, and why we're in this environment today is because we've been trying to create change for a long time and not being listened to. And only now that it's being more visible, I think Amber was dead on in the fact that people are less distracted and able, you know, to see this in their everyday lives. And now, you know, without sports and all these different distractions that kept us distracted from really what was going on, people were able to see it more visibly now. And so like that's what led us today in terms of, you know, the cannabis industry and where it stood specifically with Black and brown businesses before this we were already struggling with high barriers of entry, denied access, just basically lack of access to capital and technical resources in order to just be able to get into this industry. And that's even with the increased access of equity businesses being able to get licenses first. We were competing for shelf space. We were competing for respect, right? People think that equity or Black and brown products are lesser quality. And what I have to remind people is that the war on drugs was, you know, 50 plus years. And these people coming out of this have been selling this plant for a long time. So there's a lot of experience and knowledge and understanding of this plant that's being missed out. And when the traditional market is trying to value these products. And so like we were already struggling, and then you have, you know, the impacts of COVID, and then you have this recent disaster where all these businesses were targeted. And, you know, like Amber said, I think probably more than 30% of the businesses in Oakland were equity businesses that were looted. And most of these businesses do not have, they were already struggling to make it. They were bootstrapping it. And now with this loss, some, you know, $500,000, $250,000 worth of merchandise, you know, I don't know that we see a lot of hope. And that's the reason why we're trying to push this initiative now, to get support for those businesses and raise funds. I will have the website out shortly, but definitely keep posted to Supernova Women's website and equitysessions.com, and we will be releasing the actual fundraiser website. It is for Black and brown businesses specifically to recover from the impacts of this tragedy.
Thanks so much, Ramon. I just want to interject real quick and apologize to attendees. It is apparent that yeah, there are a lot of folks out there that don't like these conversations happening, and one of them's been removed from the chat, but I you know, apologize for the disruption. Chris, coming back to sort of present day, and you know, and acknowledging obviously this is not only a phenomenon that's happened with equity businesses, not only something that's happening in the Bay Area. Wow. Yeah. Wanted to ask, you know, if you could sort of give us a 30,000-foot view of the impact that's been felt by cannabis businesses throughout the country in recent weeks. You know, has this been a more localized phenomenon or something that's nationwide?
Well, first off, thanks for getting rid of that troll. That was pretty disturbing stuff in the chat there. Caught me a bit off guard as we're getting started here, but
Same.
to your, yeah, and just more reason why these conversations are so needed. To your question, these were not localized. Well, so these were national. These instances were national in terms of they were happening everywhere. In terms of the break-ins at dispensaries, as you mentioned, there were a lot that happened in California. Oakland dispensaries seem to be hit particularly hard, but there were quite a bit in Los Angeles. In Chicago, our dispensary, which is on the southeast side of the city, was hit pretty hard, but so were many of the dispensaries in the city of Chicago. I heard there were a number in Philadelphia, to the point where I don't think there was a single open dispensary in Philly for a time. That may have changed by now. Some stores in Cleveland were hit. So this was happening nationally. But that said, it wasn't like this was a nationally coordinated effort. There was no like organization going, let's go target dispensaries all around the country. The phenomenon was essentially the same everywhere, which was which was essentially people who were looking to do break-ins, taking advantage of what's happening in the streets, the very important protests that are happening, that of course were taking law enforcement attention away from break-ins. Law enforcement was out in the streets dealing with peaceful protesters when they should have been protecting people, protecting businesses. But it sets up a situation where folks who are looking to be advantageous can go and engage in a kind of break-in or looting or robbing, knowing that there's probably not going to be anyone there to stop them. It's certainly the case at our store, and that was the case a number of other places. So it was national, but it really, I think, draws attention to, and I think we're going to get to this next, but it really draws attention to some reforms that are needed that would help make cannabis businesses less of a target when it comes to these kinds of, these kinds of sort of break-in attempts and attacks on the stores.
No, yeah, you read my mind. I mean, can you speak to some of those things that do make cannabis a target, and how it speaks to the way that groups like NCIA need to either continue the work that they're doing on policy reform or revise it?
Yeah, so number one, I mean, I think this really highlights the need for access to just basic banking services. I mean, if there's one thing that makes a retail cannabis dispensary a target, it's the fact that it's very widely known that cannabis businesses are mostly all cash. And so if somebody is looking to rob a store, they're going to be looking for stores that have high value products, particularly smaller high value products, which cannabis is, right? An eighth of cannabis costs anywhere from $20 to $55, depending on where you are. It's relatively light, and so you fill up a whole box full of cannabis products. That's that's worth a lot more than a box full of bottles of booze. And there's not much that we can do about that. But the other thing that folks are going to be looking for is cash. And if they know that these businesses are likely to be all cash businesses and likely to have a lot of cash on hand, it makes the businesses a lot more of a target. If we had access to the same banking services that any other industry had, and we could accept credit cards and have 70 to 80% of our transaction in credit cards, like most retail businesses, we would have less cash on hand. But even something like a situation we saw in Illinois, there's a very small number of banks in Illinois that are willing to do business with the industry, much like there are in most states. There's only 2 or 3, I believe, now in the entire state. None of those are located in the city of Chicago. So that means we can't do cash drops at our local branch a couple times a day to keep the amount of cash on hand at a minimum. We can't send our staff on a 3.5-hour drive to the branch down in Southern Illinois. So we have to wait until they're able to send an armored car pickup to our facility, which understandably they're not going to do that every day when it's a 3.5-hour drive in each direction. So cash pickups happen a couple times a week instead of a couple times a day, which further which further complicates and makes us even more of a target for potential break-ins. Yeah, no, absolutely. And I want to go back to all 3 of you here, because I know each of your businesses has been impacted in different ways by the events of the past few weeks. And I recognize that these are still events that are fresh and that you're likely still dealing with on a number of levels. But can each of you just tell us, at least briefly, how you've been impacted,
by the recent robberies or burglaries?
Yeah, sure. So I am a manufacturer as well as a distributor. We also have a delivery service, but my businesses were unaffected at our location, but all of my clients were robbed. So some of my clients had, product on consignment and inventory on consignment there, and now we're navigating that piece. How do
Your
we?
inventory.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
How do we get back some of our lost inventory? But
Yeah.
yeah, my heart is very heavy for everyone involved, obviously, but definitely for my clients. And
Yeah.
some of these places, I don't even know if they're going to reopen. Like, this was devastating. So it's been tough.
Yeah, no, I kind of have been, I don't know, it's been a tough couple of weeks for me as a distributor, and specifically in this case, my business model is set up to represent those Black and brown businesses, those small legacy farms, small manufacturers, that wouldn't have access to the market through larger distributors, trying to create pathways for us to be able to scale up with our businesses. And it was already tough to compete, like I mentioned before, trying to get shelf space, and it's been a year and a half of trying to make sure that people make their commitments to these products. A lot of dispensaries were given access to adult use licenses, for them making commitments to have shelf space, and a lot of them weren't doing it. And so that was already tough enough. And then with COVID coming in, 50% of my business was impacted as a distributor, as most of the dispensaries didn't. It took a while for them to transition to a new way of operating, as it did most of us. And then now with most of my businesses, most of these equity businesses that were impacted, I helped represent them and distribute them. And so like Amber was saying, a lot of their product was in dispensaries that were now robbed. And so the expectation is that, we can't get that money right away. Even if they had insurance, it will take several months to get that. And so in the meantime, excise tax and my tiny little percentage is tied into all of that. And then, specifically, the ones that I do deal with, their facilities were robbed specifically. So although I didn't have direct impact to my facility, the indirect pathways are hurting almost more than the direct pathways, because Bloom 2 dispensaries, they won't be open for a month to 2 months, maybe more. Magnolia is looking at a month or 2 months. A lot of these dispensaries were damaged where it's going to be several months. And so that's going to have a ripple impact on the whole industry.
And, because both you and Amber have mentioned now just the incredible percentage of at least Oakland, but I think Bay Area wide, the equity operators who have been impacted by this. Absent insurance kicking in, can these businesses survive?
I don't know. We're used to, it's funny, cannabis community in a whole, and communities of color, we're used to taking losses. And so we're very resilient. Like, we have a lot of drive and determination. We've been told that we can't do things for a long time, and we've still strived and done them anyway by any means possible. And so, I have a lot of confidence in our ability to drive. But when it was already, you were already struggling, and now you've lost $250,000 worth of product, I'm having a hard time seeing any light of hope. And which is why, pretty much the last 2 weeks, I didn't even do not one delivery. It was focused on creating some of these direct impacts that we could do now, like pleading to our greater community and saying, look, these businesses are not gonna survive this, and if they don't survive this, then what is the greater impact on equity across the state and then across the nation? If we can't support the smallest of us, then like how are we gonna survive this? Like I don't see how we're doing it. If the biggest companies are already struggling, then just know proportionally the impact to the smallest one.
Thanks for that. And Chris, I want to let you speak to the experience that you've had as well.
Yeah, I mean, look, for us, it clearly hasn't been as big of an impact as it would be for a smaller business owner, certainly a social equity licensee. So, you know, we're not crying victim here by any means. One thing I've said since the day of is one of the things that bothered me most about this is that it diverts the attention away from the really important goals of the protesters and the people who are out in the streets calling for change, and, you know, allows people who are inclined to disagree or dislike what's happening to focus instead on, you know, these issues of vandalism or break-ins that had nothing to do with the protests. And I think it's really important that we make that known. As I mentioned, these were opportunists who were taking advantage of a situation, knowing that there was unlikely to be anyone to come and stop them. We have very strong reason to believe that in our case, at least, it was gang-related violence or gang-related break-in. And we serve a community on the southeast side of Chicago that is predominantly people of color. Our staff, all the way up through all the management at that store, reflects that. Our staff is about 90% people of color there. These are folks that were very involved with the protest movement before the break-in, and I know did not want to see this divert attention from those really important goals. And so, look, it's going to have an impact on the business. We were hit extremely hard, and we're probably not going to be open until late July, so it'll be about 2 months of no revenue. The insurance will help as much as it can. They do cover a bit of lost revenue, but unfortunately that covers the net, not the gross, which means they don't cover staff salaries during this time, which presents a whole other challenge for us as a business. It's a lot of revenue that we're missing out on. But I will say, I try and find some positives in a difficult situation. I saw the community that we've been in now for 5 years, including folks from our store, really come together in the wake of this. The very next day, our alderman, Sue Garza, organized a cleanup crew. A lot of businesses on the stretch of Commercial Avenue that we're on were impacted on the same day. We had there were probably 60, 70 people or so that formed a crew that went and cleaned up inside our store, outside our store, went down the whole stretch of Commercial Avenue, cleaned up the whole area. So by the end of the day, you would barely have known that anything went on. A number of our staff that would have been at work that day came in and joined them. And even Mayor Lori Lightfoot came and toured the store, which I actually think is a real sign of progress of how far we've come as an issue, that, the mayor of a major city, when touring the destruction of a wave of looting and vandalism, came to a marijuana dispensary first. I thought that was a real sign of progress, but really just the way that community came together and embraced us as part of that in their cleanup efforts, and that we were able to join with them, gives me a lot of hope for the future, but also, really strengthens our resolve to get back open as quickly as possible to continue serving the members of this community that have been so underserved in so many areas, and that we're very proud and grateful to be a part of.
I think those are all really great points. And I am curious, what has your experience been in, I imagine you guys have initiated the process of trying to recover from your insurance for the losses that you've suffered. What's your experience been?
So far, it's actually been fairly positive. Now, I will say this, I'm not the person at the company that deals with the insurance, thankfully, but I am in touch and hear what's going on. They've been very responsive. I think part of the issue here is that there are very few insurance companies that cover cannabis businesses. And so with this dispensaries getting hit nationwide, and it really fell on just a very small number, 2 or 3 carriers get hit with a lot of claims all at once. And these are not major national insurance companies. These are relatively small carriers. So they're looking at having to pay out amounts that they're probably not prepared to handle, and are likely going to have to go to the secondary insurance market themselves to be able to pay out these claims. So I do expect it may take additional time to actually receive the payouts, but I do believe we will likely get it. We had to deal with insurance just a few months back. We had a fire at a store in Maryland. It was actually a fire at the restaurant next door to us in the same strip mall, which caused some fire damage. And insurance was good to work with through that. They did pay out. A little bit of a different situation here, given that they got so many claims at once, but so far so good. They've been good to work with, and I do anticipate that in the end we will wind up getting paid out, even if it does wind up taking longer than it might under normal circumstances.
And just to put a fine point on it, that's not going to put you out of business. Waiting a few months for a check.
No, and look, if we were an independent operator with 1 store on the south side of Chicago, and frankly, if we were a social equity operator, owned by somebody, entirely from within the community, not just managed by folks in the community, but we were a single store owned by a social equity applicant from that community, this would be a different story. We might not be able to survive this, right? I mean, even once insurance pays out, it's not going to pay out 100% of what we would have made in the 2 months that were closed. It's not going to cover 100% of the rebuild. That's the nature of insurance, right? Your insurance covers you up to a certain amount. Our actual amount of loss is going to be higher than that. So we are going to have out-of-pocket costs. We're going to have additional out-of-pocket costs to make sure the store is even more secure coming back, because we want to make sure that our patients, our staff, our customers feel comfortable. So we're fortunate. We are a multi-state operator. We do have the resources to survive this. We have revenue coming in from other operations, but I don't know if we would have been able to make it through this if we were, a local Black and brown owned business operating 1 store in the south side of Chicago.
And to be clear, that's even if the carrier is saying, yes, we're going to cover you. I mean,
that's even if they were
right.
Yes, even if they were responding exactly this. And look, and I mean, the reality too is we have to acknowledge we might not get the same response from the insurance carrier if we were a local, Black social equity owned business.
I think that's right. I really want to go to that point and turn it back to Ramon and Amber. How has the experience that Chris described compared to what you've seen both for your own and for your clients' businesses as they've put in insurance claims?
I know in my experience, particularly, you've seen like some of that predatory nature. Part of the problem is that a lot of these applicants and businesses lacked real technical assistance and real understanding of maybe even policies that they were signing. And so you're seeing larger insurance companies be able to take advantage of that lack of knowledge and denying claims, and a lot of these businesses not knowing that they do have pathways to respond, or even worse than that is that when they signed those insurance docs, they weren't understanding exactly maybe what they needed to do on their end to make sure that those payouts would happen, and that they were, signing on to those agreements and fulfilling their responsibility in those agreements. So we have cases where a distributor, maybe not all of their cameras were working, or the cage was not secured correctly in the proper manner. And so you have technicalities where, although that applicant may have thought they were conforming to what the insurance company was wanting of them, in the end, because of small little cases, they're being denied complete insurance claims.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Amber.
I just wanted to echo what Ramon said. There are a lot of small operators. There was one operator that was being incubated by a bigger operator, and the bigger operator, they were both robbed. The bigger operator has been moving through their insurance claims process with little to no issue, whereas the smaller operator is being denied. I mean, they were at the same premise. I'm assuming that they have very similar, they're probably using the same insurance carrier. and the smaller operators just running into all these problems, you know, and being denied. So it is a matter of knowing what to say. And I know that Summer can speak more to this because she and I actually had a discussion about this on a CCIA call prior to our webinar. But it is a matter of the smaller operators needing to know what to say, knowing what their rights are, and just being represented properly so that they'll get what's due to them. So
absolutely,
yeah, need folks on our side, fighting on our side, like Summer.
absolutely. Summer's a good person to have in your corner. And I do want to turn now to the other half of our panelists and into the exciting part of our presentation where we start talking about insurance in more detail. And want to get their thoughts regarding, you know, what the companies that have been impacted in the ways that we've just heard can do to start putting themselves in the best position to recover their losses through insurance and otherwise protect themselves. Ian, I wanted to start with you. You know, if one of your clients called you today and told you they'd just been burglarized, they'd just been robbed, what can they do right away to start themselves off on the right foot?
Yeah, sure. Well, first of all, I appreciated the comments from Amber and Ramon and Chris, and I think they're right on. I mean, I think part of the issue that we're seeing now is that these property damages are coming in the context of, you know, a larger problem that's affecting the entire insurance industry in the country. So we've got the COVID disruptions. You've got issues that many carriers are involved in right now in terms of responding to claims for business interruption, losses that, you know, in many cases are not covered under policies, you know, even outside cannabis. And so now we've got, you know, businesses that are filing claims with a small number of carriers. Now, keep in mind, these carriers are very specialized and they know what they're doing. They know how to adjust cannabis claims. And cannabis claims are, you know, much more complicated than if it was a clothing retailer, for example. These are highly regulated industries, and the insurance policies are complicated. You've got a whole host of warranties and limiting endorsements and exclusions, et cetera, that can come into play. So it's a fact-based analysis, and I think that the operators, you know, I think certainly should know what's in their policy and work with their brokers, of course, to understand that going into the claims process. So now that we're a couple weeks out from most of the disturbances, hopefully operators have done things like immediately file a police report. That's very important. Contact the regulatory authorities, the cannabis regulatory authorities. Most states will require to contact at the state level. Certainly, you may also have to communicate with the local permitting authority, and you should be checking on that. And then every operator is going to have a duty to mitigate loss under the policy, and this is, you know, through all property policies and crime and theft policies. So, you know, you need to lock down the facility and make sure that any other cash on hand or product or, you know, other things, you know, security cameras, computer systems, whatever it may be in the premises is made safe. You know, have that communication with your employees to make sure that they're safe. And then I think the most important thing sort of at this point out, now that we're a couple weeks out, is just to document everything. So it's really important to recognize that if there's a dispute that happens on coverage in the claims process or it goes into litigation, the most probative evidence to a judge or a jury a year from now is going to be that contemporaneous communication, right? It's going to be that email or that text or that letter that's sent at the same time as the communication. So if you have a telephone call, for example, with the adjuster or an investigator, you're going to want to follow that up with a short confirmatory email, for example, or a letter. And just make sure that you document all that. You know, take photos, save the video surveillance, you know, save all that stuff. That's going to be important because, again, this is a very factually based and can be a lengthy claims process, as I think, you know, Chris referred to, and he's right. It's going to take some time. But, you know, ultimately, and you know, I think Summer and Eric can touch on this, but you know, teasing out causation if there are, you know, issues of failure to comply with dozens of regulations, whether that actually caused the loss or contributed to the loss, I think that's an important factor here. So, you know, I think you know, all of these things are things that you should be thinking about, communicating with your broker, communicating with the carrier, and you know, good luck.
and Eric, you know, assuming that you know, you've done what Ian suggested. You've started your claims process. What are the types of coverage that businesses can hope to take advantage of, and you know, and what are some of the factors to consider there in terms of whether or not they're going to have that coverage? You know, what types of damages can they recover?
Good afternoon, everybody. First of all, the most important thing to do is take out your policies if you haven't done so already. And usually you don't read your policies very much after your broker's delivered to and you've paid the bill or you've financed the bill. So the real issue comes down to is reading your policy. What did you actually pay for? What is in that policy? More importantly, now that after you've had an issue, is how do you file a claim? And so the best thing to do is, again, read the policy. There's a specific section in every policy on how to file a claim. But more importantly, get in touch with the broker who sold you that policy and discuss your loss with them and have them advise you on the best way of getting to the insurance company to file a claim. Now, with COVID and a lot of companies working remotely, I can tell you the claim process is slowed down considerably. So I just want to manage your expectations. Even though you filed a claim and the insurance company may respond that they have received your claim, it's going to take time for them to investigate the claim and ultimately, if you're successful, pay out that claim. The type of coverages, well, we should be looking at property damage, whether it's physical loss on your store or physical loss of your inventory or business interruption, as Ian commented on. And again, it came down to what were the specifics of what you gave your broker and the information you provided and what is covered in your policy. So a good policy review is necessary. And, you know, we're here to help anybody who has been affected. We're happy to review your policy and guide you in the right direction. You know, that's what the NCIA is here for, to help support their members. And, you know, we look at that there are many different add-ons to property policies. You may be covered for your outdoor signs, for your plantings, for your accounts receivable and important papers. Again, the amount of companies offering property insurance in the cannabis industry is a small number. It's less, probably a half a dozen. We know who the underwriters are. We know who the better ones are. And we know which ones have limited claims adjusters. So,
sure. And I apologize. I know I'm starting to cut people off a little bit, but we are coming towards the end of our presentation, and not the end of our questions. So, Summer wanted to give you a chance to respond to that, and also, if you could give some thoughts. You know, we've talked about having product on consignment. Can you talk about how that can impact coverage for losses as well? I'll let you go.
So. Thanks, Jason. What I can say about, excuse me, everybody, about product on consignment is oftentimes policy language doesn't specifically address consignment, right? It's an agreement that one person or one entity has with another. Oftentimes these agreements are not things that are actually put together in writing, so there may not be a true contractual obligation. But you know, a lot of these issues, a lot of these claims, and a lot of these issues are not going to be addressed amicably via insurance. So it's likely that there are going to have to be some sort of a lawsuit, civil action, you know, things that the business owner does not necessarily want to enact on their partner, because, you know, especially for equity businesses, equity is vying for shelf space. So oftentimes they'll have a consignment agreement just to give them that access to be able to sell and market their product. So they're not going to want to, you know, sue the entity that's given them that shot or opportunity. So what I would suggest personally is, one, ask that entity to submit a claim to their insurance. Now, there may not be coverage. That's what's called care, custody, and control. So another party who's not the first party, the named insured, has care, custody, or control over your product. So there is some coverage in some instances, and often in other instances, there is not coverage. So like Eric said, do a coverage review. I would say go to someone that you trust. There are a lot of wonderful organizations that directly serve equity. I know the Bay Area was hit the hardest from what I've heard and from all the reports that I've seen. I know Cleveland was hit really hard, Chicago, and unfortunately areas that are typically low income areas where cannabis operators have taken up space have been hit really hard. But fortunately in those areas, there are nonprofit organizations that help. I would say go to someone you trust, ask them to put you in touch with a professional who does not have an interest in winning your business. Unfortunately and fortunately, I mean, this is a good money-making business for all of us, right? For operators, for professionals, and for ancillary businesses. So if you go and ask the question of someone who may have an interest, they may give you biased information. So get the most unbiased information that you can get. And, have somebody walk you through the parts of the insurance policy that you may not have cared about before. Unfortunately, as professionals do try to address issues or try to provide information on things that are important, but oftentimes the policyholder or the purchaser does not listen and they don't feel that it's important. So it's really hard until something happens to impress upon the buyer how important these things are. But I think now with everything that's come about, the buyer is more willing to listen, and the insurer and the insurance broker who's actually selling the policy is more willing to take the time to explain these things. I would say to any insured or any purchaser of an insurance product, if there is a warranty language that requires you to sign off on provisions where you have to individually sign or initial pages, those provisions are written that way and you have to sign them that way because the insurance carrier wants to make sure that you understand your coverage would be adversely affected if you don't do these things. Now, from the carrier standpoint, and I'll say I now function as an insurance carrier. So our company provides actual coverage, and we also function as a broker. So we work with other insurance professionals to place coverage for them. So I kind of have a whole bunch of hats all wrapped up in on one head. But I would say, our goal is to provide coverage. It's not to deny claims. It's not to put people out of business. Most of the organizations that got into cannabis, into insuring specifically cannabis, did so because there was a need and we wanted to be a part of meeting that need and be a part of ensuring the industry as a whole succeeds. So the warranty language oftentimes will reduce coverage, but what I can say is a true professional, independent claims adjuster or advisor is going to be of paramount importance, because all of the coverage parts, just because something's excluded in one coverage part doesn't mean it's excluded in another coverage part. So an insurance policy is a contract. It's a legal document. It says that if you do something, we'll do something else. So if the insured has complied with all of the parts of the policy that they were supposed to comply with, which is, you pay your insurance premiums, you keep your product safe. If there is an accident or an incident, you did your best to preserve your property. The insurance contracts say certain things, like there's a preservation of property provision in the special form property policy that says if you act to preserve your property, which means you move it, you hide it, whatever you need to do, the policy will extend coverage to that location. It doesn't specify where the location is, but it extends coverage in a more broad form than the policy provided initially. And it says, the language says any peril for 30 days. You know what I mean? So those kind of things are indicative of our true goal as providers of coverage to actually help. And the insurance term is indemnify, which means, as Chris said, there are some things that won't be covered, when a policy does pay out. And that is because the goal of an insurer is to indemnify the insured. So indemnify means to bring you back whole, protect your business, bring you back whole again so that you can function and operate as you did before the loss. So
and
if
wanted to jump real quick and hopefully come back, because I think we're at a good point where I was going to ask Eric, in looking at these policies, as Summer says, as a contract, what are some of the provisions that you think are most likely to come into play as carriers are making their decisions, whether to cover the claims that we're talking about, these kinds of losses?
So when you're reviewing your policy, the best thing to do is start towards the bottom where you have endorsements and exclusions. And you may find that in their exclusions, there may be an exclusion for civil riot, theft, and vandalism coverage. And so you really need to, dot your I's and cross your T's and look for all these types of exclusions before you buy your policy. If your policy does not exclude it, and there's no language within your policy that says it is or is not covered, primarily it will be covered. The insurance company has the responsibility to tell you exactly what they're not going to cover versus what specifically is going to be covered. And again, that's when the negotiation comes into play with your adjuster when you file a claim.
And Ramon, one of the things that you had discussed, I think, as we were prepping for this, is that at least some equity businesses had gotten denial letters based on language in the policy that excludes any damage related to social unrest. Is that right?
Yeah, we've been getting some feedback from a couple dispensaries that basically said they were denied because the robberies were being listed as social unrest or because of riotous activity as opposed to a burglary. And so now the burden of proof is on the small business to show that it was a burglary as opposed to a riotous act.
Well, and I do want to take a minute here, just to make sure businesses impacted do look carefully at those denial letters and consult with professionals around it. And this is only my opinion, but it's strongly felt, and I think rooted in fundamentals of insurance coverage. If an insurer is denying under an exclusion for civil riot or social unrest, the insurer should be required to establish that this is what caused the losses. If they're relying on exclusions and policies, and when you've got trucks of 30 armed guys rolling up and doing targeted attacks on these businesses that we do know have cash and cannabis products that are highly desirable, these losses, at least in most circumstances, I don't think are going to be fairly described as having been caused by social unrest. And I think you want to look in particular to the location of the business to know how strong that claim is or isn't, because and I can speak at least for Oakland, some of the businesses that I know were targeted, your Harborside, Blunts and More, Magnolia Wellness, these are not places that you end up randomly, and they are not places that were close to some of the other protest activity that was going on. And so I really would encourage folks who have gotten those denial letters, start asking questions of your carrier about what they are basing that determination on, and hopefully that'll spur some movement. And Ian, Summer spoke a little bit to it as well, but can you just describe quickly, and I should say to the audience, we've gotten permission to go 10 minutes over due to some of the issues that we're having earlier. And so hopefully you can stick with us, and we're going to keep rolling here. But can you tell us about, Ian, about protective safeguard warranties and what issues insureds may have with those in this context?
Yeah, sure. So I can't speak to any particular, coverage under a particular policy, but what I will say is that what we've seen, outside the context of these latest disturbances, when we deal with claims issues arising out of thefts and fires and other property losses involving cannabis operators is that there are certain protective safeguards that are particularly important. Certainly, central station burglar alarm. We've seen situations, for example, where there's a central alarm, but it wasn't properly monitored or hooked up. The vault ratings and safe room ratings for how product is stored, that can be very important. Compliance with the regulations generally, making sure that the security video is properly monitored and in the proper locations, inside doorways, in terms of how they're controlled and keeping that security corridor between front of house and back of house, and certainly whether a loss happens during business hours or after hours can be a very different evaluation for the carrier in terms of the operator's obligations. But I think the main thing is just making sure you're compliant and being able to prove compliance. And if somehow there is a determination that you're not in compliance, it is important to understand how that non-compliance affected the claim. Did it really cause or contribute to the claim? That doesn't necessarily mean you're going to win the case with the carrier, but you're in a stronger position if you can show that it really wasn't probative or relevant or contributed to the loss.
Thanks so much. And I had a question. Amber, I have a client. And my understanding is he's not alone, but I guess I'm curious what your knowledge of whether or not that's true is. He is an equity operator who is waiting on funds from the city that that his city has from the state to pay out equity grants and small business loans. Can't afford until he gets that to do some of the work that city regulators have required that are prerequisites to him filing a claim, or filing his renewal application, and has now received a cease and desist letter from the city. And I apologize, we don't have the time to really lay the groundwork, but are these familiar problems for equity operators trying to navigate this system, or more of an isolated incident?
In short, yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
And so, and I apologize, but because I just want to make the point. In summary, I wonder if you could. What's the impact of the potential impact, at least from an insurance standpoint, of having received that letter a week before all this happens?
The impact is huge. I mean, the risk could, in essence, be uninsurable, or the cost may triple. There's a reason that the policy language is written the way that it is. The insurance carrier understands it's a high value product. It's at high risk for theft, damage, even temperature change. It's a high risk product that has an astronomical value, especially on the streets. So as the carrier is looking for the owner to be active in, partnering to protect this property. So if they're not in compliance with the local government, the insurer really has no incentive to insure them. And the carriers that will insure someone that's out of compliance, the minimum premiums start in the $5,000 to $15,000 price range, which for an equity applicant, it's astronomical. They can't afford it. Even
right.
an business that's making money oftentimes can't afford that.
Right. And the point of this question isn't to belabor that it's difficult to succeed as an equity operator, but to drive home that even in the process of seeking to acknowledge and redress some of the harms suffered by communities of color during the drug war, as many social equity programs are expressly designed to do.
I do want to clarify, Jason, when I said virtually uninsurable, I personally don't believe in the answer no. I don't believe in it.
Right.
There's always a way around something. So that's the part where the relationship comes in. So if an equity applicant is told no and has some extenuating circumstance like that, definitely talk about it to your insurance professional, have them advocate for you, and concessions are always made.
No, absolutely. Well, and I mean, part of my, my point is that, there's a difficulty just navigating the process of remaining in business as an equity operator, and getting that letter, as you say, could lead to a denial of coverage, right? And if a week later they end up getting robbed, and that's it's a real issue, and we do, just even in dealing with insurance, run into significant institutional inequity on numerous fronts, with the likely result being that a number of Black and Brown-owned businesses won't survive, while for larger, well-financed and predominantly white-owned companies, the past few weeks ultimately are likely to be a blip on the radar in terms of their ability to continue operations. And I wish I had more time. We have had to cut a number of questions, but I know for anybody out there who is interested in talking to any of the panelists about these issues, they would be happy to do so. On behalf of the Risk Management Insurance Committee, I really want to thank Ramon and Amber and everyone on the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee for this terrific collaboration. I want to acknowledge Tahir Johnson, whose idea it was to bring these committees together for this panel and make it something that's much more meaningful and beneficial to NCIA's members than it otherwise would have been. And also to acknowledge the NCIA, the rest of the NCIA staff who was involved, including Felico Castile, who lit the fire unders to put this together in the first place, and to Brooke and Brian Gilbert, who herded all of us cats to get this done so quickly. Others on the RMIC who were involved in this but couldn't join us on the panel: our incoming chair, Stephanie Bizzuto, Kevin Holler, Matthew Grimes, Sandra Shields, Alan Shu, and Adam Pat. Thank you all. And I, at least, am happy to hang out and take questions as long as NCIA will have us. But at some point, we'll get kicked out. So, Brian, how do we go to questions from here?
Yeah, thank you so much, Jason. We can leave the meeting room open for another 5 to 7 minutes once I get through my outro. We conclude the webinar by letting everyone organically leave out while we play a backing track. So that'd be a great time for any audience members who might have a question that they didn't pose in Q&A to participate in the chat room. And Jason, myself, and any other panelists that might still be available, we'll stick around for just a few more minutes and address any questions via the chat room. Perfect. And that'll start my outro process. So let's all give a virtual round of applause for these amazing committee members and panelists that joined us this afternoon. Not only, like Jason said, were they able to come together to get this really important and timely subject matter together and pushed out to our network, but they're really going to be doing some amazing collaborations over the next coming weeks and this upcoming committee term, which applications are open for the next few weeks. Committee term to increase NCIA's voice within this space. All right, so we do want to conclude the actual outro by giving you a heads up about some few upcoming events that NCIA has on the calendar, including our Cannabis Caucuses and our Industry Essentials webinars. So starting tomorrow, over the next week and a half, we are hosting the inaugural Cannabis Caucus Cyber Series events focused on the Heartland, Midwest, Northeast, and California regions. In case you've missed the news in the member newsletter, we're taking everything that you love about our member-only Cannabis Caucuses and we're formatting it into a one-of-a-kind virtual experience. To kick things off, you'll receive exclusive access to industry insights delivered firsthand from national and regional leaders, just like today, followed by a live Q&A session with audience members to provide the interaction you expect when participating in an NCIA event. We'll then conclude the evening with a happy half hour featuring exclusive live musical performance with plenty of curated opportunities to interact with your regional network across multiple platforms, including Zoom and Slack. Throughout, we'll be showcasing some suggested strains alongside incredible DIY recipes for some cannabis-infused appetizers, mocktails, and cocktails, while encouraging everyone to share their experience with the creation and consumption process. So, log into the NCIA community today to secure your spot. And if you have any issues during the registration process, don't hesitate to email our team at events@thecannabisindustry.org. And perfect. And then after our Cannabis Caucus Cyber Series wraps up, we're jumping right back into the thick of things with our Industry Essential webinars. Our members-only fireside chat series is quickly becoming the premier place to interact with elected officials and congressional champions for cannabis reform. In last month's episode, our government relations team was joined by Congressman Lou Correa and Earl Blumenauer to discuss veterans issues. This month, please join Mike and Michelle as they talk with Congressman Ed Perlmutter for a discussion around the Safe Banking Act. As with the Cannabis Caucus events, this is an exclusive session only open to current NCIA members, so please ensure your membership is up to date. Then head to NCIA's website to secure your spot before you're gone. And I really appreciate that shout out to here, Jason. If you are not a current NCIA member, you're one of the non-members in attendance today, please do message Tahir Johnson, our amazing rockstar business development manager, to talk more about membership. And maybe he might be able to give you a special invite to one of the upcoming events to learn more about NCIA and how membership can benefit your business. Following that, to close out the month, we'll be debuting our new Service Solutions series of Industry Essentials webinars. The Service Solutions series is our sponsored content webinar program, which will allow business owners the opportunity to learn more about premier products, services, and industry solutions directly from our network of established suppliers, providers, and thought leaders. In the inaugural Service Solutions webinar, we'll hear from members of the Cannabis Consortium, composed of vetted businesses aligned in support of the cannabis industry and its leaders from plant to product. During this conversation with established supply chain and compliance experts championing business resiliency, you'll gain insight into why and how consortiums and partnerships help with sharing resources, real supply chain projections post-COVID-19, how to verify vendors for your cannabis businesses, as well as an in-depth exploration of case studies and real-world examples of why vendor verification and quality matters. As with today's session, this webinar is free for both NCIA members as well as non-members to attend. So if you haven't already, please head to NCIA's website to sign up today and invite as many of your colleagues who might be interested as well. All right, and with that, thank you all so much for participating in another NCIA Industry Essentials educational webinar. A huge thank you to our panelists, audience members, and nearly 2,000 member businesses, which make our work possible day to day. Please complete the attendee survey after leaving the meeting room to gain immediate access to our presentation file and exclusive 30-day access to a formatted video recording sent directly to your email inbox. I hope you all have a wonderful week, and I look forward to seeing you all again next time for another NCIA Industry Essentials educational webinar. We'll leave you all with some audio stylings by the resident musician at our Colorado-based events and one of the performers at those upcoming Cannabis Caucus Cyber events, KJ Leese, and SSDP Amplified project artist, Indigo Sun. Enjoy.
Thanks so much again, Brian. I don't see any open questions in the queue. Did any of the panelists have any parting thoughts they wanted to share?
Nothing here. Thanks, everybody.
I'd just like to say, if you guys can support the online concert, www.igotfiveonitlive. We're raising money for all the Bay Area cannabis companies that lost something, trying to come together as a community. It's being pushed by Tucky Blunt from Blunts and More, and there's a lot of musicians that will be on there live. It's free, but they are asking folks to help donate. So if you guys could spread the joy and enjoy the concert a little bit, there'll be a lot of local artists and some non-local artists performing. So check us out on the 16th and on Tupac's birthday and enjoy it.
That's tomorrow night?
Yes.
Great.
Appreciate you guys. Thank you, Jason. Thank you, Summer. Thank Ian, Chris, Eric, and Amber especially. I appreciate you guys giving us this this panel, this spotlight, be able to kind of share some of our ideas.
Yeah, that's what
Absolutely.
Thank you to everyone for participating and just being willing to bear with the difficult, awkward, subject matter, because it needs to be talked about. So thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Really appreciate you all.
Thank you all so much. We'll see you all next time.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Bye.